Okay, we've seen how to use function arguments. We went through some examples. But why do we need a special lecture dedicated to arguments? Well, that's because we've only seen one type of function arguments, but Python defines several types, and we're going to see each of them in this lecture. The type of arguments we've seen in the previous lecture is called positional, meaning that the number and position of arguments in the function call should be the same as in the function definition. If the number of arguments is different, then Python will return a type error. Let's test this. So we had my first function of x, y, and z. Let's define it again. So def my first function of x, y, and z. Okay, colon. Sum equals x plus y times z, and return sum. Okay, this function takes three arguments, x, y, and z. But if we specify only two of them when calling the function, Python will tell us that the number of arguments it was expecting and the number of arguments we gave do not match. So let's say this. Let's say my first function of 1 and 2. Okay, so we got a type error. My first function takes exactly 3 arguments and 2 were given. Also remember that in this case, the order of arguments is very important when calling the function, because the first value in the function call will be associated with x, the second value with y, and the third value with z. Now let's see another type of arguments, keyword arguments. Keyword arguments allow us to ignore the order in which we enter the parameters in the function definition, or even to skip some of them when calling the function. Let's see this in an example using the same function as earlier. So let's refer to the same function, my first function. Using keyword arguments means you can specify the parameter name and assign it a value inside the function call. So let's see this. My first function of, let's say, x equals 1, comma, y equals 2, and z equals 3. And we got the result 9, which is correct. This allows us to type them in a different order as well, unlike positional arguments. So let's try this. Let's say z equals 3, x equals 1, and y equals 2. So notice we get the same result, 9. Okay. You can also mix positional and keyword arguments, but the rule when doing this is to first specify the positional arguments and then the keyword arguments. If you don't follow this rule, Python will return a syntax error. So let's see this. My first function, let's say x equals 1, y equals 2, and let's say 3. As I said, notice the syntax error, non-keyword arguments after keyword arguments. Now let's try this in the right way. So let's say 1 and 2 and z equals 3. And we got the same result. Correct. This way we can call the function multiple times, having z equal to 3 each time and only changing x and y. You can also define a default value for an argument by specifying it in the function definition, so in the parameters list. Let's see this. So def my first function, and we have x, y, and z equals 3. Sum equals x plus y times z, and the return statement, return sum. In this case, the value of 3 is assigned to z by default, in case no other value is specified in the function call. If another value for z is specified when calling the function, then the new value overrides the default one. So let's test this. Let's say we have my first function of 1 and 2. Okay, so we got 9 because z was by default equal to 3. However, if in a function call we do want z to take another value, we can explicitly specify this. So let's say my first function of 1, 2, and 4. This time we got a different result, 12, because now z is equal to 4. But what if you need to define a variable number of parameters in a function definition, and you don't know how many parameters you need? Well, Python has a solution for this as well. In fact, two solutions, one for positional arguments and one for keyword arguments. Let's see them. The solution to pass a variable length parameter list is to use an asterisk, like this. Def my first function of, let's say, x and an asterisk and args colon print x, let's say. The args variable you see here is actually a tuple of possible additional parameters. The tuple is initially empty if we don't specify additional parameters apart from x. So calling this function with a single argument would be a valid thing to do because x takes care of this. So let's try my first function of, let's say, the string first. Okay, and first is printed out. In fact, to see this better, let's add a print statement inside the function to also see the contents of the args variable. So let's redefine the function. Okay, print x and also print args. Now let's call the function again by passing a single argument. Okay, now when calling the function, we can see x has been printed out. This is the string. But we also got an empty tuple, which is actually the args parameter. Now let's call the same function, but with more arguments this time, and see if the tuple gets populated. So, my first function, let's add a couple of strings. Second, third. Okay, so we have the confirmation that the args variable is indeed a tuple. But how can we print all the arguments we pass into the function? Well, simply by iterating over that tuple using a for loop. So let's remove the print args statement and write the for loop. The def statement, print x. Now, let's say for each parameter in args, colon, print each parameter. Sorry. Also, don't forget about correctly indenting your code when using the for loop. So, this is the function. Now let's call the function again with 3 arguments. Okay, we got the expected result, right? Now, if you have or need a variable number of parameters but want to use keyword arguments instead of positional arguments when calling the function, you can use a double asterisk followed by kwargs, so something like this. The concept and functionality is similar, so I won't get into it just to avoid getting boring. Remember that the names args and kwargs are just conventions. You can use any name instead, as long as you don't forget the asterisk for positional arguments or double asterisk for keyword arguments. These are mandatory. You can find a guide to use different type of arguments in the link attached to this lecture.